Hey there, it's Carolyn Bloom from Bloom Handmade Studio, checking in with you from my new home here in Sleepy Hollow, New York. It's great to be back on the podcast recording a wrap-up for the Water Arcade Crochet Along, which I ran from the middle of April until the end of May. You may be saying, yes, Carolyn, but it's the middle of June and you're just now doing a wrap-up. Well, guilty as charged. It just so happened that the end of May came and went and I wasn't finished with my project. And so I am going to practice what I preach, which is when I run a crochet along or a make along or a knit along or any of these things, I think I've decided that I want makers to feel like they can join in at any time, they can finish at any time, they can post whenever you want, and it's all good. It's all good. And so I'm practicing what I preach. I turned my Water Arcade project into a sweater, and a lot of circles, folks, and I just didn't get it finished by the end of May. So I hope that's okay, and that if you aren't finished with your project, no worries. Maybe you'll watch this wrap up now, maybe you'll tune in later. I'm just happy to have y'all come along as we go through it. I wanted to open up this podcast now that I'm finishing things up to issue a heartfelt thank you to the lovely ladies up at Espace Tricot, Melissa Clulo in particular, for her interest in the Water Arcade project. Melissa had seen my Water Arcade wrap on the Christy Glass Tell Me About Your Rhinebeck Sweater episode back in 2017, and she kindly earmarked that as something she would like to make. And it was with her encouragement and her desire to learn how to crochet during the course of the pandemic that I was inspired to learn how to do a podcast and learn how to do a tutorial on crochet and how to run a crochet along. And so, Melissa, thank you so much for getting that started and liking the project and being so encouraging of me. I can't tell you how much I really appreciate it. And of course, your posts of your beautiful project, I think, inspired so many others to join in on the crochet along and give crochet a try. So thank you, Melissa. I really do appreciate it. I also wanted to just open up this podcast by telling you a little bit about what I wanted to accomplish here today. And that includes telling you how I turned what was originally a baby blanket into a shawl, then into the sweater that you can kind of see back there on the mannequin in the background. I'll tell you all about my particular project and how I converted those rectangles into something that I can wear as a sweater. And so I'd like to tell you about how much yarn I needed for the circles, how much yarn I needed for the diamonds, which yarn I used, how I went about figuring out how to do it, and how to sew all of those pieces up. And I want to be really informative here on the podcast, as well as in the show notes down below. If you're not catching this as I'm saying it, don't worry, just check out the show notes. I promise I'm going to upload everything that I talk about here now on the podcast into those notes so you can refer to it later. So I want to do all of those things, and I want to show you how I figured out how many circles that I used to make my sweater. So there's a whole lot to do today, and so why don't we just go ahead and jump in. As an overview, let me tell you how much yarn I needed to make a sweater for my 38-inch bust. I needed 600 grams total of sock yarn. I needed 400 grams for the circles and another 200 grams for the diamonds, the border, and the seaming that I did after the fact. For the main color that I used, which is that kind of creamy gray white, I turned to Orange Flower Yarn's sock yarn, and the colorway is called Cottage White. One of my favorite accent colors that I used is actually Espace Tricot's Grace yarn, which is a beautiful blend of merino, silk, and cashmere in a colorway dyed by Annie Paaren called Musee. I love the subtle pink that colorway is. I think it just blended beautifully into the Cottage White. And I'll give you some close-ups of that once we go over and check out the mannequin. I also used Viola sock yarn in a colorway called Elephant. That's a very pretty mild gray. I had some French Market Fibers sock yarn. French Market Fibers is actually one of the first indie dyed yarns I ever discovered. And sadly, Margaret is no longer dyeing yarn, but I used a pretty pink from her as well. The other four colors, the other four accent colors are bits and bobs that I just pulled out of my stash. I'm sorry, I don't have the tags for them, but I can give you an overview of what they are as we look at the sweater up close. One of the things that I love about this particular project is that you can really deep dive into those remnants that we all seem to collect and find things that will work or won't work, and you can just make a couple circles and see if they're playing nicely together. And in fact, you'll see when I show you how I figured out how many circles I needed to make my sweater, I actually made like 30 to 40 circles of colors that got kicked to the curb because they weren't going to be right. So that's one of the things that I like about this, is that ability to try and see how it works. And if it doesn't, just put them aside for a water arcade in the future. So with all of that having been said, why don't we go check out that sweater up close and personal? Okay, here we are getting a closer look at the sweater here on a dress form. And what I wanted to do is just show you that the sweater is actually comprised of many rectangles. And you'll recognize bits and pieces to this if you've made the water arcade project yourself. So the front and the back are made with 8 circles going down and 8 circles going across. So those pieces are perfect rectangles of 64 circles. I added 2 circles here on the shoulder that I split the colors on. So here on the sides, there's actually 9 circles for the front, if you will, that have been divided in half for color and then surface crocheted to give the appearance, the illusion of a seam being put in place. When I went to attach this 9th circle to the 8th row of circles here, you'll notice I made a regular diamond. And if you followed along with the pattern or watched the tutorials, you know how to make those. But when I got to this particular point, as well as this one, I just didn't attach another circle to them. I just attached the diamond point to here, to this one circle, as well as up here on that particular circle. The other element that I wanted to show you here is I did an extra round of single crochet all along the neckline of the front and the back, as well as down here on the sleeves. Notice all those ends. See what I mean? I really don't get everything finished when I say I will. Don't judge, don't judge. I'll get them done, I promise. Anyways, I did that row of single crochet just to finish things off and make them look tidy. Well, they will be tidy once those ends have been woven in. And then I also did some slip stitch crochet to seam up the seams, or the ends here, as you can see. So there's the single crochet, bringing the front and the back together. And I'm going to show you how to do that here shortly. And I did the same thing here underneath the sleeve. And the same sort of thing here when I did the attachment of the sleeve to the front and the back. All right, so this is the close-up of the sweater. Let me pan out here so you can get a better sense of what that looks like all together. And now I'll just come in one more time and give you the overview of the colors that I used. This gray here is the orange flower sock yarn that I mentioned in the colorway Cottage White. This is the Espace Tricot Grace yarn. This is that gorgeous merino cashmere silk that I had mentioned to you in the colorway Musee, dyed by Annie Paaren. And here is the Viola sock yarn in Elephant, which is a very pretty gray. And this is the French Market Fiber sock yarn here. I love the different colors of that particular sock yarn. Sadly, Margaret isn't dyeing anymore, but I really loved her aesthetic. And then when I was looking for other colors to blend into this, I really just tried to find some very subtle soft colors. Like here, this is kind of a rose gold. I believe this has a little bit of silk in it as well. And I like how it brings a little bit of sparkle into the sweater itself. This, let me see right here, this is just a workhorse sock yarn. I only had about 10 grams of that, but I thought it was so pretty. This petal shell pink, I really liked how that played off of the French market fibers and the gray. So I incorporated the little tiny bit that I had of that. I think I have maybe 5 circles of that particular colorway all throughout the sweater. And you can see here some more of the colors that I picked. I veered a little bit into the browns, a little bit into kind of a bronze, that rose gold. Here's that French market fibers again. And you can see I interspersed them with lots of circles of that Cottage White by Orange Flower. And my goal here was to let the Orange Flower do all of the heavy lifting and then let these accent colors just make their debut and have their moment and then leave the stage. So that was kind of my goal here with how I played with the colors. I'm also going to tell you it was a little tricky for me with color placement simply because of the nature of the circles and the colors that I chose. I did have some concerns about the sweater reading, well, how shall I put it? Nippular. So that was something I was factoring in as I was picking colors and working on placement. And I actually did undo a couple of the circles as I was going along once I figured out how the sweater was going to fall on my particular frame to try and fight that particular problem. So here's a little side view. You can really see the seams here as I pan out. Yep, there's another end that needs to be woven in. Don't judge, I'll get it done. And then I'll just show you the other shoulder here as well. This is yet another, for that ninth row that kind of divides front and back, I divided the circles in half. If there's interest, I could show a tutorial on how to work a circle with 2 colors. It's kind of hard to see them here with this light, but you can tell that there are 2 colors that, again, I surface crocheted to give the illusion of a seam. So I'm going to pan out here, just give you one last look, and then take you over to show you how I came about coming up with the number of circles that I needed to make this sweater. Here I have the sweater laid out on my bed, flat on top of a sweater that I used as my muse to get this project started. What I'll do here is I'll just peel this back to show you how it compared to the first sweater I actually ever made in terms of sizing. So you can see they're very similar, even though they're different shapes. This one that I used as my guide is a raglan sleeve, and my Water Arcade sweater is actually more of a drop sleeve. It was very useful to me to use this sweater as my guide on how many circles I needed to make. I wanted to do a little recording on this in case you're interested in turning your Water Arcade into a sweater. You too could go into your closet, find a sweater that you really love how it fits you, and use it as your template, if you will, to determine how many circles you need to have going across, as well as how many circles you need to have going down. And so here I'll just mention that I have a 38-inch bust, and I decided to make this sweater here. This is a 41-inch in circumference for the bust line. I wanted to make it a little bit smaller than this sweater. So I went with 8 circles going across, each circle being approximately 2.5 inches blocked. And I have 8 circles in length going down. So the front is a perfect rectangle of an 8 by 8 circles situation. And then I have here, this was the 9th circle that acts as kind of that bridge between the rectangles of the front and the rectangle of the back. And this is the one that I made in 2 colors with some surface crochet to mock a seam. And so here you can see what I did. I just laid out some circles that I had finished in order to get a sense of how many I needed to make for the front. Similarly, I laid them out here on my sleeve, and I like a deeper sleeve. I can't stand it when sleeves are too tight and the armrest is too narrow. So I decided to go with 3 circles here in the front, 3 in the back, and then 6 going down. So my sleeves are also perfect rectangles. I know they look like they're bell sleeves in the photos, but that's only because they just go straight down, kind of like this sweater of days gone by. This was actually the first sweater I ever made. It just goes straight down. There's no sleeve shaping whatsoever. So the rectangular nature of the Water Arcade project actually lends itself really nicely to just becoming a sweater, more of a boxy sweater. There was no shaping in this whatsoever for the sleeve or the front or the back. And I just used a sweater that I have had in my closet this is actually the first sweater I ever made. I just used this as my guide. I'll also mention that these circles that you see here are ones that I had intended to put into the sweater, but they didn't make the cut. So I have, I think there's 30 of them in total, 30 circles that I really like the look of them in their skein format, but when I put them in with the Cottage White and the other circles, they were really much too vibrant, and I happen to like vibrant colors, but for this particular project I had to tone it down. So what I've done is I've actually tucked these aside, and I'm going to make yet another Water Arcade project of some nature. I haven't decided yet, and having these done already gives me quite a jump on doing so. So I hope this helps. If you have questions about what I did here using a sweater from my closet to guide my Water Arcade project, don't hesitate to send me a message or put them in the comments here of the podcast. If you have the question, other people will as well. I'll do my best to answer them. But as you can see, I really just tried to lay out the circles for length and width to understand what the dimensions of my rectangles would need to be in order to make this sweater. I hope that helps. Now, the next segment will be me actually wearing the sweater so that you can see how the resulting piece fits. Okay, so here I am wearing the sweater. I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. I love the boat neck and that drop shoulder that I was going for, and the kind of effect of the bell sleeve, even though it's just 6 circles in circumference all the way down from the shoulder to the wrist. It does give that illusion of being a bell sleeve. And so I think the overall effect that I was going for this particular design was a more formal sweatshirt, if you will. And I really like how I feel like I can pair this with a pair of jeans, or should this pandemic ever end and my husband and I go out on a date, I like the notion of being able to partner it with something maybe a little more dressy. So I would say overall, couldn't be happier with the final piece, but I did want to mention something to you about turning Water Arcade into a sweater. As I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, it took 600 grams of yarn for me to make this, and 600 grams it's heavy. This is a heavy sweater. That crochet just gobbles up yardage quite quickly. And so I do have a slight concern as I go about wearing this in the long term that the weight of the sweater is going to cause the separation between circles and diamonds to become even more pronounced. I'm gonna lean in here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about already. Here at the shoulder, you can see that the gaps between the circles and the diamonds here they're a little more pronounced here at the shoulder than they are, say, down here at the midriff. And I think that's fine. I like that effect actually for now. Fresh out of the box, off the hook. I think that looks actually kind of cool. I like that. I do have a concern as I go about wearing this for the long haul that those gaps might become too pronounced. And I wanted to just mention that, again, I have a 38-inch bust. I made this sweater 40 inches in circumference, and I feel the weight of the sweater as I'm wearing it. If you are larger than I am, if you are looking to make a bigger piece, I would be worried about the amount of weight that these connections of your diamonds to your circles are going to bear. This is not a typical crocheted pattern just because those circles are connected by those diamonds, and it's invariably going to have a little bit of gapping, but I'm worried about in the long haul if you were to make an even heavier sweater, what that might look like. Similarly, I used fingering weight for this project. You could certainly give it a try with DK or worsted, but again, I think your sweater might turn out to be even heavier, and I would just be worried a bit about what that might look like in the long term. Likewise, if you wanted to go with a poncho and you find yourself making even more circles than the 204 that I needed to make this sweater, your piece is going to be even heavier. So just be mindful of the gapping that might occur between circles and diamonds. And you could play with the pattern if you wanted and just maybe have some parts of it be the water arcade design, separated perhaps a bit by some double crochet or single crochet to provide some more structure to your piece. It's one of the things that I like the very most about this design is the fact that it can be easily tweaked to be whatever you would like it to be. Once you get started with it, you get the hang of it so quickly. Circles and diamonds become rectangles or squares, and those geometric shapes can be sewn together to be really anything you might like it to be. So I would encourage you very much to give it a try, but just be mindful of the fact that it does get heavy and it gets heavy quickly. So I think that wraps up everything I need to tell you about my particular water arcade project. I would like to just bring it back to the crochet along and say once again how very happy I was doing this make along with you all. It was really nice to connect with old friends again and make new friends as we went through that 6-week adventure. It was a most welcome counterpoint to this pandemic and the isolation that caused. So thank you everyone who participated, be it watching these podcasts and commenting or contributing your own posts on Instagram and letting me find you via the hashtags or tagging me directly. I'd also like to say a heartfelt thank you to the lovely ladies who gave away such beautiful prizes over the course of the crochet along. Legacy Fiber Arts, Daisy Lane Designs, Spruce Lane Designs, Marionated Yarns, Frances Giff, Annie Paaren, Seashore Sharon, and Hand Carved Hooks. Thank you all so much for being so generous and making the crochet along even more exciting by giving away such beautiful prizes. I really do appreciate it. I hope to do another one of these make-alongs soon, so if there's a design of mine, either knitting or crocheting, that you're drawn to, by all means send me a message and let me know that you've got your eye on that, and maybe we'll get that on the hook or on the needles and give that a go for our next make-along. I also have some new designs that'll be coming out very soon, so I hope you'll follow me over on Instagram at Bloom Handmade Studio or on Facebook by the same name. Or you can always check out my website, which is bloomhandmadestudio.com. I appreciate you tuning in here on my channel. If you've got any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them here. And be sure to check out those show notes for the details of everything that I went through here on this podcast regarding yardage I used and dyers that I turned to for this palette. It'll all be in there, and that's a good resource if you're contemplating making a water arcade sweater. If you didn't finish your water arcade project, but you have every intention of doing so, just keep at it and keep tagging me over on Instagram. I love seeing what you have going on and the palettes that you all have chosen. I'm always happy to repost them in my stories so that other people can be inspired. And I'll even say that that's been one of the serendipities of doing this, is seeing how you all have inspired others. I really wish I could open up my comments so that you could see how people responded to your projects. It was really quite heartwarming. So until the next one, thank you all so much. And I will see you around here or over on the gram or on Facebook. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. I'd like to do now is show you just how easy it is to seam together your pieces, either your squares or your rectangles, together using the slipped stitch method. I, just as a point of reference, wanted to show you, here are my fronts and backs. I've done my border, and then I also did an extra round of single crochet around both pieces. Once that was done, I just carried on with one of the threads, I think it was from the front piece, and I began seaming together fronts and backs using slip stitches. So case in point here, just grab your yarn and pull it through the V's of your single crochet and carry on right through the loop on your hook. Let's do the next one together. Okay, your hook goes under the single crochet from the front piece, under the single crochet of the back piece, the next stitch, pull the yarn right through and carry on through the loop on your hook. And you can just keep going along through every stitch, front and back pieces, which will line up so nicely since they're basically the same size. You've got the same number of stitches, so no guesswork there to be done. You just carry on working slip stitches to fasten them off. And I like the effect of this very much. I'm just gonna pan out here so you can see how nice that seam is. Here, attaching front and back together, but here it is in the shoulder area where the front piece was attached to the sleeve. And I used the same technique here under the sleeve. And here's that critical part that's under the armpit. So you see, I think it's a nice and tidy way to go about doing this. There are loads of different methods for sewing together crochet. I just happen to like this particular technique for this project.